The tennis world thinks it knows Carlos Alcaraz, but the real Carlos is completely different when the cameras turn off. He has secret habits, strange superstitions, and fears he's never shared. Today, you'll learn all of them, and the most surprising secret comes at the end. Why Carlos calls the same person after every Grand Slam victory and the secret sentence he tells them. This secret explains the real reason behind all his success. By the way, don't forget to mention in the comments which city or country you're watching me from. The first secret about Carlos Alcaraz relates to his sleep routine. While most athletes have regular sleep schedules, Carlos's sleep routine is completely different. He goes to bed every night at exactly 10:47 p.m. This time isn't random. When Carlos lived with his grandmother Maria as a child, his grandmother would read him stories every evening at 10:47 p.m. Maria would say, "This time is magical, Carlos, because there are 2 hours and 13 minutes until midnight, and these numbers will protect you." Carlos remained loyal to this time even after his grandmother died. In fact, during the 2022 U.S. Open final, he set an alarm at the hotel to sleep at this time. His coach Juan Carlos Ferrero initially found this habit strange, but then decided never to interfere so it wouldn't affect Carlos's performance. This sleep routine is so strict that Carlos follows it even during tournaments. During 2023 Wimbledon, his quarterfinal match ended late, and Carlos returned to the hotel at 11:30 p.m. Under normal circumstances, despite being tired, he should have slept immediately, but he waited for 10:47 p.m. the next night. "If my sleep pattern gets disrupted, my performance gets disrupted too," Carlos thinks to himself. After going to bed at this time, he also has a special routine. First, he looks at his grandmother Maria's photo. Then, he visualizes the next day's match in his mind. And finally, he puts his left hand on his heart and says, "I will win tomorrow too." The second secret relates to Carlos's racket selection. Everyone knows he uses Babolat Pure Aero, but nobody knows that he draws a small heart on every racket. He draws this heart with his left index finger and repeats this every time he changes rackets. Inside the heart, he writes the letter M. This M is the initial of his first love, Marta. Marta was a girl Carlos met at a junior tournament in Murcia when he was 14. Nothing happened between them, but Carlos never forgot the motivation of that day and feels Marta with him in every match. Marta now works as a veterinarian in Madrid and has no idea about Carlos's habit. At that tournament, Carlos was very impressed when he first saw Marta. The girl was sitting in the stands watching Carlos's match. Carlos played the best tennis of his life that day and won the tournament. After the match, Marta approached Carlos and said, "You played great. Congratulations." Carlos felt his heart beating fast at that moment. After the two talked for a few minutes, Marta's family came to pick her up, and Carlos never saw her again. But the happiness and motivation of that moment settled in Carlos's mind. "When I write the letter M on every racket, I remember that day," Carlos thinks. "That feeling still motivates me." The third secret is hidden in Carlos's eating habits. He never consumes red-colored food before matches. Tomatoes, red peppers, strawberries, even red apples are forbidden. This superstition comes from an experience he had at a challenger tournament in Barcelona in 2020. That day, he ate strawberries for breakfast and played the worst match of his career. His opponent gave him a heavy score like 6-0, 6-1. Since that day, Carlos believes that red foods bring him bad luck. Even his mother Virginia prepares a special menu for Carlos at home. "My mother sometimes forgets and puts tomato salad on the table," Carlos laughs, but I immediately remind her. This obsession with nutrition isn't limited to just red foods. Carlos also feels compelled to eat honey before matches. But this honey isn't ordinary honey either. Special organic honey he gets from a small beekeeper in El Palmar. This beekeeper's name is Jose, and he's 73 years old. Jose became friends with Carlos's grandfather years ago. When Carlos was little, his grandfather would take him to this beekeeper, and Jose would let Carlos taste fresh honey. "This honey will give you strength, Carlos," Jose would say back then. Carlos still orders honey from Jose before every tournament and definitely tastes this honey. Jose watches Carlos's achievements on television and feels very proud. The fourth secret relates to his social media usage. Although Carlos appears not to manage his Instagram account himself, he actually makes every post himself. But what's interesting here is that before every post, he looks at the photo and asks himself, "Does this make me happy?" If the answer is no, he never posts that photo. That's why Carlos's social media accounts always seem full of positive energy. Also, he never goes on social media after 11 p.m. because this disrupts his sleep quality. Looking at social media at night makes me think unnecessarily, Carlos says quietly to himself. Carlos has another strange habit about social media. He never follows his rivals' accounts. If I'm going to beat them on the court, it's not right for me to watch them on social media, he thinks. That's why he never looks at the accounts of big rivals like Djokovic, Nadal, Medvedev. The only exception is retired Roger Federer. Carlos definitely watches every post by Federer because he sees him as an idol. Federer's different. He's not my rival anymore. He's my teacher, Carlos says inside. The fifth secret relates to Carlos's pre-training ritual. Before every training session, he closes his eyes in the locker room for 3 minutes and takes deep breaths. During this time, he always visualizes the same scene in his mind, the moment when he watched a professional match for the first time with his father, Carlos Sr., when he was 8 years old. That day, his father told him, "One day you'll play on that court too." Carlos motivates himself by thinking about this memory and can never skip this ritual. Juan Carlos Ferrero has even noticed that when this ritual is disrupted, Carlos's performance drops. Carlos attaches great importance to those 3 minutes before training, says Ferrero. I don't interfere with him anymore. What goes through Carlos's mind during this 3-minute meditation is much more detailed. He first remembers that day's memory, then plans the training he wants to do today, and finally tells himself motivational sentences. I am strong. I am ready. I will win, he repeats inside. Sometimes these 3 minutes feel like 30 minutes to him, but he never rushes. Ferrero initially tried to rush Carlos but gave up when he saw Carlos's resistance. Without those 3 minutes, I don't feel ready, Carlos had told his coach. The sixth secret relates to Carlos's secret signals during matches. He always makes the same movement during set breaks. He puts his left hand on his heart and waits for 5 seconds. This movement isn't actually a self-confident suggestion. Carlos greets his grandmother Maria this way. When Carlos was little, Maria would tell him, "Listen to your heart, Carlos. It will show you the right way." After his grandmother died, Carlos feels her with him this way. In fact, during the 2022 Wimbledon final, his eyes filled with tears while making this movement. Television cameras captured this moment, but commentators didn't know what it meant. Maria had a very important place in Carlos's life. She was actually the person who made Carlos love tennis. When Carlos was 4 years old, Maria bought him a small racket and said, "Come on, Carlos, teach me tennis." Carlos then tried to teach Maria how to play with the ball, and the two threw balls in the garden for hours. Maria didn't know tennis at all, but was trying to learn to spend time with Carlos. Abuela was my first student, Carlos thinks. She was the person who started my love of tennis. The seventh secret relates to Carlos's secret talent in language learning. Everyone knows he's learning English, but actually Carlos is also secretly learning Chinese. The reason for this is that he wants to talk to his fans in their own language at tournaments in China in the future. Carlos studies Chinese words for 15 minutes every night before going to bed and can now have simple conversations. Only his closest friend Pablo Carreño Busta knows this secret. I'm very surprised when Carlos says something to me in Chinese, says Pablo with a smile. He's really very talented. Carlos's desire to learn Chinese started at the 2021 Shanghai Masters. At that tournament, a Chinese fan had given him a letter in Chinese. When Carlos had the letter translated, he learned how much the little girl admired him. The letter said, "Carlos, you are my hero. I really want to be able to talk to you in Chinese someday." This letter deeply affected Carlos, and from that day on, he decided to learn Chinese. Now Carlos dreams of being able to speak Chinese with that little fan one day. Carlos is also secretly learning French. When he wins the French Open at Roland Garros, he dreams of making a thank you speech in French. France welcomed me very warmly. I want to thank them in their own language too, he thinks. This determination of Carlos to learn languages shows that he is a perfectionist not only in tennis, but in every field. The eighth secret is the hidden truth about Carlos's fear. Although he looks like a lion on the tennis court, Carlos is actually very afraid of spiders. This fear is so intense that he checks the room first, even when staying in hotels. In 2021, when he saw a small spider in his room at the Miami Open, he called hotel security at midnight and changed rooms. This incident didn't make it to the media, but Carlos's team now checks rooms first at every hotel. I know it sounds very funny, Carlos admits to himself, but I'm really very afraid of them. This fear dates back to Carlos's childhood. When he was 6 years old, he was playing in the basement of their house in Villena when he saw a big spider and got very scared. That day, his father, Carlos Sr., told him, "Men don't fear spiders." But this didn't reduce Carlos's fear. This fear continues even after years. In fact, Carlos stops the game even during training when he sees a spider on the court and waits for someone to remove it. Ferrero knows this situation very well and now has the courts checked before training. The ninth secret relates to Carlos's musical taste. Everyone thinks he listens to reggaeton and pop music, but actually Carlos's secret passion is classical music. He especially loves Chopin's works and relieves his pre-match tensions with this music. He's even secretly learning to play piano at home. When his mother Virginia heard piano sounds coming from Carlos's room, she was very surprised. Carlos told her, "This calms me down, Mom, but don't tell anyone." Virginia shared this secret only with her husband, Carlos Sr., and both find their son's talent very sweet. Carlos's relationship with music is very deep. When listening to Chopin's nocturnes, he recalls difficult moments in tennis and motivates himself with this music. Chopin's music reminds me that difficulties can be overcome, Carlos thinks. In fact, on some nights when he's nervous before a match, he puts on his headphones and calms down by listening to Chopin. This music has become his secret weapon. Carlos also secretly sings at home. He especially loves singing in the shower, and this is one of his most relaxing moments. His favorite songs are generally romantic ballads, but he doesn't tell this to anyone either. He doesn't want to upset old-fashioned people who think male tennis players don't sing. The 10th secret relates to Carlos's writing habit. Every night before going to bed, he summarizes the day in a small notebook. In this notebook, he doesn't write match results, but his emotions. He keeps a diary starting with sentences like, "I was happy today because," or "I was sad today because." He has been keeping this notebook since 2019 and has now filled 5 notebooks. Carlos never shows these notebooks to anyone and sees them as his own private world. This writing habit helps him a lot. On difficult days, he reads old notebooks and remembers how he overcame difficulties. Especially what he wrote during the period when tournaments were canceled due to COVID in 2020 inspired him a lot in the following years. When he reads, "I struggled a lot in those days, but I didn't give up," Carlos feels motivated again. And now comes the biggest secret. Carlos Alcaraz calls the same person after every Grand Slam victory. 78-year-old Dolores, his grandmother Maria's best friend. Dolores has become Carlos's spiritual grandmother after Maria died. After every big victory, Carlos calls Dolores and asks, "Does Abuela Maria see me?" Dolores always responds, "Of course, mijo, she's very proud." This conversation is very important for Carlos because his real grandmother Maria died before she could see his professional career begin. Carlos performs this ritual to be able to share his big achievements with Maria. After the 2022 U.S. Open Championship, Carlos cried when he called Dolores. "Abuela, I miss her so much," he said on the phone. Dolores replied, "Maria is always with you, Carlos. You carry her in your heart." This conversation affected Carlos so much that the next day at the press conference, he couldn't fully explain why he was so emotional. Dolores has a very special place in Carlos's life. After Maria died, she continued to show grandmother love to Carlos. She definitely sends gifts on Carlos's birthdays and sends him good luck messages before important matches. Carlos also loves Dolores very much and sees her as his second grandmother. "Aunt Dolores is as important to me as Grandma Maria," Carlos says inside. This special relationship also shapes Carlos's character. He is very respectful and loving towards elderly people. At tournaments, he especially takes care of elderly fans and loves taking photos with them. "They remind me of my grandmother and Aunt Dolores," Carlos thinks. Carlos's secrets show that he's not only a talented athlete, but also a young man with deep emotions. Behind his smile in front of cameras, there's attachment to his past, family love, and his own rituals. These secrets make Carlos even more lovable and human. The emotional burden he carries in every match increases his performance and provides extra motivation against his rivals. Carlos's secret world makes him a much deeper person than the superstar we see on the tennis court. These secrets will be with him in his future successes and make him even stronger. Every time he holds a racket, he feels Marta. Every time he breathes, he feels his grandmother Maria. And with every victory, he hears Dolores's voice. These emotional connections make Carlos not only a great tennis player, but also an exemplary human being.